everyone. This is Alicia, and welcome back to the Eat Me podcast. Y'all, it is Saturday, and I'm excited to actually be here recording. I was going to record earlier this morning, but things got in the way. But I'm glad to be here with you all now and just discuss something that's been on my mind. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you all have also been thinking of this as well. But it's not really discussed as much, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today. And what I am seeing, at least in my personal life and in other people that are close to me, is that a lot of Americans are experiencing high amounts of debt. We are in debt, not just as a country, but as households, as individuals. It's tough living here in the United States of America if you haven't noticed already by all the other things that are going on. But debt is another thing that piles on to the issues that lie in this country. And so today I wanted to just kind of like talk about that and also just kind of share my personal journey as I move through this situation as well, because I feel like the more that we talk about things, we can come up with solutions and really educate one another about how to manage our debt, how to expose, right? It's hot, y'all, burning up. If you're looking at this on YouTube, you can see my face is like glowing. Where I recorded, there's no air conditioning, and so it's a little hot, but we'll make it. But yeah, I just wanted to expose, this thing and just talk about it, like I said, because I feel like many of us are embarrassed about being in debt and feel like if others know how much debt we are in, that they will have something to say about it or feel some type of way about us. And I'm here to tell you that's not how I approach this, because I know what it's like to be in debt. I know what it's like to be out of debt. I know what it's like to actually put a plan together to get out of debt, like create a budget and all those things. And so just want to talk about that with y'all. And as you know, if you've been listening to the podcast, I've got a beautiful article for us to go through and talk about this. I found this article by Maureen Milliken, and oh, my eyes itching, y'all. Sorry. And the article is called "The Demographics of Household Debt in America." And I thought this was really interesting, this article, because she literally breaks down, as it says, the demographics of debt in America, and she offers some assistance and like not like a full on solution to everything, but just some key pointers and tips for us to move forward as we look at our own debt, maybe debt that we know others are dealing with, and we can help them with sharing this actual episode just to give them some insight and also just a sense of like relief, like, oh, I'm just not the only one going through all this shit. There are other people out here that are also in debt, that are also struggling, and we can lean on each other for support, and just, try to get through this the best we can. So the article starts off and it says American household debt is on a relentless upward trajectory. It was at a record 18.2 trillion by 2025, and that's up by 4.6 trillion that's crazy, since 2019. It includes 12.8 trillion owed on mortgage loans, 1.46 trillion in auto loans, and 1.63 trillion on student loans, and 1.18 trillion on credit card debt. The delinquency rates, she says, accounts for 30 days or more behind on payments. They are also on the rise, with 4.3% of debt in some stage of delinquency. With 90% of Americans having some form of debt, you likely can see yourself in those statistics. I don't know if you heard that, but she says with 90% of Americans, 90% of having some form of debt, you likely see yourself in those statistics. And that right there alone was something that I wanted all of us to hear. Because like I said at the start of this, I think a lot of us think it's just me. Like, I'm the only one going through this. Everyone else is living their best lives and doing all the things. Meanwhile, I'm trying to scrape all the pennies together just to make it work. And we're seeing in this actual article alone, 90% of Americans are having some form of debt. So there you go. It's even more likely if you're between the ages of 30 and 59, or female, Black, or have kids. So I fit every category. I am between the ages of 30 and 59. I'm a female, I'm Black, and I have a kid. Like, wow. So there's that. Take with that what you will. Household debt demographics may capture who is most likely to get into debt, but they aren't the full picture. Understanding debt statistics and what's behind them will help you manage your finances, get out of debt, and build a strong financial foundation for yourself and for your family. And I love that she ends that whole beginning of this actual article with providing some hope and letting you know like there's more to it. It's not just here it is, you're stuck and live with it. It's like, no, this is not the full picture. And not only is it not the full picture, you have the ability to build a stronger financial foundation. And I love that part of this article. So it says, goes on to say that the household debt is divided into categories. This is basically the next section, which is entitled Average American Household Debt, Key Statistics. So like I said, the household debt is divided into categories, with the biggest being mortgages, auto loan, credit cards, and student loans. Right along mortgages are home equity lines of credit, a revolving loan that homeowners who have paid down enough of their mortgage can take out. While they're a fraction of while they're a fraction compared to the other categories, they're on the rise. Other household debt includes personal loans, medical debt, and any other credit that a consumer takes on and doesn't pay off immediately. The biggest category by far is mortgages at $12.8 trillion. Mortgages account for 70% of the 18.2 trillion household debt load. Home purchase is likely the largest debt you will take on in your life, with a median price of a home in America being $414,000 in 2025. And that's the median price. I live here in New York City, and to get a house for $414,000 is just about impossible. That would be amazing if you could get a house that cheap here in New York, but it's just not feasible. But they're talking about the median, but it's even wild to think that that's the median, because I remember I'm from Indiana, and I remember when people would buy homes back home. That's why I said it that way, but you know what I mean. People weren't, they weren't in a position to even worry about a house even over $100,000, some people, and here we are in 2025 where it's $414,000 being the median. And so that sentence goes on to say that's a big loan, even with 20% down. And when you think about that too, like 20% down, $14,000, most people don't have that much money even saved to pursue home ownership, which is also discouraging in this country because so many people are in the position of trying to pay off the other debts, trying to remain having a decent credit score. So it's a rat race, right? It's constantly trying to, let me pay these bills. Oh my gosh, but I don't have anything saved, but I still have to pay these bills. I still have to buy groceries. I still have to do this. I have all this debt. I can't afford to, just live without being in debt, right? So you're constantly on the hamster wheel of just insanity as it relates to a financial situation when it comes to how you can afford to live in America. But like I said, I love that this article, as we go on, talks more about how you can come out of that vicious cycle. So vehicles and college education are expensive too, which is why auto, which is the 1.642 trillion, and student loans, which is 1.631 trillion, are second biggest categories at 9% each. While credit card debt in America is only 7%, the overall household debt load, the fact that it is revolving, while it's revolving credit rather than a term loan, usually with much higher interest than the other three categories, means it can be hard to pay down eventually and eventually pay off. While your mortgage and auto loan may be the biggest debt bills of the month, your credit card payment is likely the largest portion of what you owe. And I wanted to stop there because it's so interesting when we think about credit cards and how they can easily just be, maxed out or whatever because of all the things that we're trying to do in this life just to make things work. And it's also to enjoy life too, right? I think a lot of us have gotten into this idea of surviving. And then we got to a point where it's like, you know what? I don't even know if the next day's promised. So here I go, right? And I'm not putting a right or wrong on any of these actions. I'm just saying, like, what is real? Then we find ourselves in more debt because we have, utilized these credit cards to the max, and that interest rate is on a whole other level, right? So it's figuring out how to balance all this out in the process of just trying to live and enjoy life. Right. I love this article because it goes through different, because I love me a good graph and diagram just to kind of give you an idea of what this looks like as opposed to the actual words that are on a page. So it provides great diagrams and graphs just to show you what that looks like. And when I'll share it in the show notes so you can see it, but it really speaks to how we look at our debt and how we move forward in knowing that there are ways to pay these things off. We might have to scale back on a few things that we do throughout the year or day or week or whatever, but it's possible to actually manage and navigate this. So it goes on to talk about household debt by demographics. So the age, race, and family type of education level all play a part in American household debt statistics. A consumer's circumstances have a direct impact on how they use credit, what kind of credit they can get, and how able they are to pay it back. Debt and age, it goes on to say that. So anyone who is old enough to get a credit card can accumulate debt. I found that out when I was in high school, I mean college. I wasn't educated on the whole credit card situation. And so when, they had different events at schools, of course the credit card people were there. They had different vendors that were out there. And, they're giving you this too good to be true talking point about credit cards. And so I'm just like, wow, I can get a credit card and have this much money and blah, 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 blah. And not but there was no education with the pitch that they were offering me on how to pay it back, and if I even had to pay it back, right? So here I am, 18 years old with a credit card that I could get cash back on and all these things, and I racked it up. Well, I didn't realize that information would go to my mother, and so she got the actual bill and was like, "What the heck is this?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "You have racked up, I can't remember how much it was so long ago, this amount of money on a credit card. Like, you have to pay this back." And it hit me like, oh, this is not just something I can just frolic around with, right? And so that's so important, I feel like, for kids that are going off to college. Like my daughter, for instance, she has been reading different books about like financial freedom and educating herself on credit cards and what it means to invest in things and how to actually manage money. And I think that has been a game changer for her because it has afforded her to have that foundation of knowing, okay, this is how this works. And to be fair for myself, I grew up at a time where my mother she grew up in poverty. And so all of this jargon, both my parents actually. And so unfortunately, my mom wasn't the type of person that was real responsible with money. My father, on the other hand, was, but unfortunately, he passed when I was 10 years old. So I really didn't get the tools that were needed to understand how to manage money. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people are in that position as well. So it's a conversation of like really understanding what American people, particularly Black and brown folks, I would say, and I mean, I'm saying not all Black and brown folks, but I would say a lot of Black and brown folks already start at a disadvantage financially in this country. And then on top of that, to not have all the jargon and know the ins and outs of finance, it could really put you in a bad, bad situation. So the age group and population. So it says total debt, including mortgages by age group and average per capita. I'm kind of skipping through the article. Ages 18 through 29, the population in America is 52.6 million people. And the total debt among this age group is 1.05 trillion. Per capita average, that is 19,962. And it goes on and on. I'm going straight to my age group. I'm just being selfish. So it's 40 to 49. We are 41.7 million people. Our total debt is 4.76 trillion. So on per capita average, that is $111,000, 111,148. That's the average per capita. That's wild. That is wild. And like I said, this article gives you a breakdown of all of that. But when you really start thinking about that, it's like, oh, that's intense. And that's like for people that's America. That's not just like people living in bigger cities. That's across this country. That's intense. And that was a source given by the Federal Reserve. It shares all that too, which I appreciate. So the percentage of credit card holders by age group and percentage of those who carry a balance. Now, this is interesting to me. I know a lot of us use credit cards. So we're looking at the ages of 18 to 29. Percentage with a credit card, 65% of that age group has a credit card. Who carry a balance, 45% of them carry a balance. And of course, I'm going to my age group because y'all know I already said it. 45 to 59 percentage of us with credit cards is 86% who carry a balance. 54% of us carry a balance on our credit cards. And I'm going to be completely transparent. I'm one of those people. I have balances on credit cards. I will pay them off, but it's what it is. Like right now, we're living in some really rocky times. And so it is what it is. But it's interesting when you look at these graphs and see it's like, oh, it's not just me. Okay. Like I'm not out here just being quote unquote, I guess in some ways you want to think you're being reckless or whatever. And at least that's in my mind. I don't want to project that on anyone else, but that is what it is. And it breaks down, it goes down even further as categories of debt by age group. It goes on and on and on. So it also talks about the debt and family type. So, and then it talks about that. So couples with children are more likely than those without to have debt across categories, including mortgage, car loans, and credit card balances. The highest average among credit card debt balances in America is held by couples with kids, followed by single parents. And so it's interesting to read that because at one point I was a single parent. Now I'm not. I'm married, and um, we are raising my daughter. I mean, she's off to college here soon, which is still wild to believe, but that is a very interesting point as well because as a single parent, like you're fronting everything, right? And even now, even though my wife and I have been together for a while, it's still hard for me to flip my mind and understand that I have help. I don't have to rely on just myself to make everything happen. And that's like a single parent, or at least for me, that was my thought process. Like I have to handle everything. One, because I had moved away from my hometown and I had to just kind of like rely on friends that were able to help me when they could, but knew, sorry, I had to plug in my computer, but also knew that, a lot of this was going to be on me because I took it out, took the leap to leave my hometown and come back to New York. So, like I said, that single parent life is rough, and credit cards were definitely involved in that as well. It also breaks down the family structure, which, like I said, I love this article. It's so visual, and I'm a visual person. I like to see how things play out. But I'm gonna go to that area. So it says family structure. Couple with children, 63% with mortgage debt, 55.4% carry credit card balances, 51.4% with car loans, and 31.1% with student loans. That's with the couples and children. Single with children, 33.5% with mortgage debt, 54% that carry credit card balances, 8.1% with car loans, and 25.8% with student loans. And like I said, it goes down further and just explains all of that as well. And it's just like I said, I can't say it enough. Like I really want to drive this home. It's like this is not just certain people. This is like the article said at the beginning, 90% of Americans carry some type of debt. Like that is eye-opening, at least for me. Very eye-opening. This part here I really like. So it talks about debt and race. And numerous studies have found that there are racial disparities in lending. Credit card reporting and scoring that end up being a catch-22 for Black and Hispanic borrowers. Having a mortgage and credit helps build a credit history that allows more favorable borrowing, but it can get credit. But it can't get credit. You can't build the history. But if you can't get credit, I'm sorry, you can't build the history. Credit and race, it goes on to say that Black and Hispanic borrowers on average have lower credit scores than white consumers, so their choices are limited. A study by Urban Institute found it's even worse for Native American borrowers who are largely credit invisible. Wow. The Federal Reserve found that Black and Hispanic applicants were denied credit or approved for less than requested at higher rates than white borrowers despite income level. The Fed and the U.S. Government Accountability Office also found that credit and loan interest rates are higher in zip codes that are majority Black or Hispanic. Even a small difference in interest rates can mean higher monthly payments and overall cost of credit or a loan. Because of less access to banks and other traditional forms of credit, Black and Hispanic consumers are more likely to use their riskier and more expensive methods of borrowing, like interest payday loans, pawn shops, auto title loans, and buy now, pay later offers. This section was so interesting to me because I personally understand and have been in these situations when it comes to having to use sources of, like they said, the riskier methods of borrowing. I've been in those positions and you pay so much more than what you really sought out to even pursue when it comes to that. And it's really disheartening, especially when you know that it doesn't have to be that way. But this is America. This is America. And once again, I have to just acknowledge the fact that this article is awesome and it breaks it down by race and ethnicity, the percentages of credit card balances, average credit card balance, the payday auto loans and pawn loans, the buy now, pay later, the percentages of consumers denied credit or approved for less than what was requested by income. It breaks it down in a graph. This is my kind of article, so I'm loving it. The difference in interest rates on borrowing between zip codes and non-white populations compared to largely white neighborhoods, both controlled for credit score and income and not taking credit score and income into account, breaks it down there. It talks about the mortgages and race. And this is a really interesting section because for me, just knowing how many folks, even in my family and close friends, uh, growing up as experiencing, hearing adults talk about their bills, knowing that they were struggling the way they were because of racism here in this country. So this section of the article says, and this is called, under this section, it's called mortgages and race. A mortgage is likely the biggest debt a consumer will have, but it comes with financial benefits. As the mortgage is paid down, equity in the home builds, bringing other borrowing opportunities. Owning an asset like a house also builds wealth and is key to generational wealth. Multiple studies show that it's more difficult for Black and Hispanic borrowers to get a mortgage, and when they do, they pay higher interest rates. A National Association of Realtors studies on race and home buying in America found that white buyers are more likely to own a home, can afford a more expensive home, are less likely to be denied credit, and are more likely to get a traditional mortgage than one backed by the FHA or VA. FHA loans don't require as high down payment as traditional loan, but often have higher interest. VA loans don't require a down payment at all, but it's up to the lender as well as what interest to charge. In both cases, borrowers are paying a larger chunk of the home cost because of a smaller down payment. And of course, like I said, this article never fails. It breaks it down, gives you the graphs needed just to really see it in plain sight. Like it's not something that you, like I said, these words, they kind of like you read it and it's like, oh, okay, wow. But then when you look at it in this way on a graph, it's like, can't be denied here, right? So it's really interesting in that way. It goes on to talk about student loans and race, right? Debt and gender. And here it says women have made huge economic gains over the decades, but most have more debt than men. In 2024, women earned 83.2 cents for every dollar earned by men, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. The median full-time yearly wage for men in 2024 was $66,793. For women, it was $5,544. That gap has an impact on women's debt. While there aren't huge disparities in how much women owe compared to men, because women make less money, the debt to income ratio is higher. Also, in many households, the mortgage or car loan is in the husband's name, his debt, but his wife's income contributes to paying the bills. Women are more often responsible for caring for children as single parents, caring for aging parents, and have less of a financial safety net, making them vulnerable to debt and making it harder to pay off. The one area where there is a big difference in debt between women and men is student loans. Women account for 63.6% of all student loan debt, initially borrowing an average of $43,000, while men borrow $38,300. It also takes women longer to pay off their loans, and they've provided a great graph here about that as well. And it's just so interesting when you think about all of these hurdles that you experience in this country as it relates to how to navigate living, right? And how debt plays a huge part. And in some ways, you can't help why you're put in certain situations as it relates to debt. And like I said, once again, I love this article for that. It goes, I mean, it gives you, it breaks everything down. I'll give you guys a chance to read through it because it talks about auto loan debt, talks about medical debt, right? It is such a great article. Talks a bit further about student loan debt, like it really goes into depth about it, which I love. This section here, which is the last part, and I think it's perfect. This is where the encouragement comes in. It says, "What should I do? What should you do if you're in debt? If you have debt, it's real, not just a number in the sea of American debt statistics. It has an impact on your life. There are things you can do to eliminate debt and be part of a different, much more satisfying consumer debt statistic pool. Some steps you can do immediately and on your own. Others you may need help to achieve, but no situation is impossible. You have the power to manage and reduce or eliminate your debt. In general, the best remedy is to create a budget to determine how much money you have coming in and where it's going. Try to cut expenses and talk to lenders of problem accounts about options for modifying payment plans, lowering interest and fees, and other options to reduce monthly payments. It'll benefit you to talk to a credit counselor who can review your finances with you, help you with the budgeting, and discuss debt management and relief plans and options. To learn more about managing or eliminated debt, read this is debt.org's advice on topics. So this actual article came from debt.org. So they provide more resources by way of going to that website. Like I said, guys, this is something I've been wanting to talk about, and I'm glad I have the opportunity to discuss this with y'all. If you are in debt, and you feel like there is no hope, know that there is hope. Know that there are people out there that are also in the same situation as you. It's just not you struggling here in America as it relates to debt. Like the article said, about 90% of us are in the same boat when it comes to debt. Obviously, it varies in terms of how much, but debt is debt. Let's just keep it real, right? So let's do our best to, keep talking about these types of topics, find ways to eliminate the debt and, be helpful to those who are, reaching out and needing resources that will help them, you know, come to a point of financial freedom. Because once we are in that space, a lot of other things can come into play where we can feel better about how we're moving and living and, doing all the things, right? Thank y'all so much for listening to this week's episode of the Eat Me podcast. And like I said, I'll share this article in the show notes. If you want to leave me any comments, let me know how you're doing in terms of your debt. I would love that, especially on YouTube. And I think you have the opportunity to do that through the podcast listener. So if you're listening on Apple or even Spotify or something like that, you can share comments as well. I love when you guys reach out and respond. I will respond back, especially if it's something positive. If it's not, just know that you're just building my platform more than anything. But yeah, if you're replying with something positive, I definitely will reach out. I love connecting with you all. So yeah, we'll just keep on keeping on, y'all. And I'll keep sharing information like this. I think it's important, like I said, for us to be in conversation about stuff like this and know that you're not alone. All right. Once again, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Enemy Podcast. I will see y'all next week. All right.